Fantasy Island, released in 2020, directed by Jeff Wadlow, produced by Jason Blum, and stars Michael Pena, Maggie Q, Lucy Hale, Austin Stowell, Jimmy O Yang, Portia Doubleday, and Ryan Hansen. Fantasy Island is a film that is absolutely breathtaking and incredible looking from an aesthetic standpoint. The filming location and scenes where it's on the island are absolutely beautiful and stunning. This movie was filmed mostly in Vihani Bay, Fiji, and after you watch this film, whether you enjoy it or not, you'll want to have Fiji on your bucket list of places to travel to. It's just incredible looking, and looks like the kind of spot where if you needed a place to detox and get away from the struggles of life, you go here. This movie grossed enough money to certainly have another film, but instead a TV show sprung from the movie. Haven't checked out the TV show yet, but maybe that's something I'll look into reviewing at another point in time. The profit margin on this film was $42 million, and the way this movie ended, you could very well have had another film. But this is the direction that got taken instead. The film has an original concept and brings to the forefront something that everybody has discussed at some point in some form. If you had one wish, or in this case, one fantasy, what would it be, and what lengths would you go in order to fulfill it? This movie plays directly into that question. The fantasies are all different and have their own unique flavor and theme. If you're a movie watcher that's into tropical scenery, sexy ladies, and moments of humor, then this is a movie that you'll enjoy. Mr. O'Rourke, played by Michael Pena, is the man that is the organizer and showman on behalf of the fantasy experience. How and why does everything take place? Well, being that this is a horror movie, the guests, when they get to the island, are eager and curious about what exactly is going to happen, and how their fantasy will take place. As you can imagine, their fantasies don't exactly go accordingly. They take a very dark turn. The humor in this movie is pretty good, too, for a movie that's not in the comedy genre. If you have not seen Fantasy Island and want to check it out before we get into spoilers, you've been put on alert. Here is your 5-second spoiler warning. Fantasy Island begins with this woman running away from something and goes into this beautiful house and hides behind this lovely desk. Ironically, the phone starts ringing. The phone is ringing and you're running and hiding for your life. So, of course, she picks up and claims she's trying to be abducted. The voice on the phone tells her it's going to be fine. And not just it's going to be fine Madison, which is her first name. So the man on the other end of the phone clearly knows what's going on since he knows her. He says, "You are one of my guests," and Madison is whisked away. Goodbye, Madison. Then we see Mr. Rourke, and he emerges and encourages his crew to smile. And in this all-white garb, it definitely has them looking like they are a staff that's a part of a cult. Has those kind of vibes. Has the vibes if you combine the movie's smile and the menu. They are the kind of cult that you would get. They kind of are part of a cult, though. Either that, or they are very dedicated employees. A slew of people emerge from the plane. These folks have won a contest. There's no mention of what type of contest this was or how it was conducted. Everybody theorizes how Mr. O'Rourke came to be in charge of this whole experience. This woman, Julia, is his personal assistant, and we see a man in the shrubs, Merrill, from The Walking Dead. Not the same character, just the same actor, Michael Rooker. Creeping in the lovely terrain, right away there's a guest, Gwen, that is in disbelief that this is all for her. Even though this is Fantasy Island, it seems a bit too good to be true. Gwen asks the million-dollar question, how is all of this possible? Good question. Julia says that Mr. Rourke tailors each fantasy specifically to each guest, so not everybody is going to have the same experience. This reminds me at the end of those commercials back in the day where it was super sped up and ended with, "Your experience may vary."
What can the U.S. Army do for you? Army. Oh yeah! Your experience may differ.
Julie informs Gwen that she's new, and to her, all of this is a mystery as well. But she knows enough to know this.
What I do know is that your life is about to change forever.
I'd say this is potentially exciting and very unsettling. When Julie leaves, her nose starts bleeding, and negative, eerie music follows, so we know a good chance things could get ominous. Gwen gets undressed and sees what looks to be this guy who literally looks like he's been through hell in the mirror. Gwen, after seeing that, needs an alcoholic beverage, and these fellas, Brax and JD, are concerned of their locker rooms. They are stepbrothers, and this man Patrick is curious about that. And what follows is rather amusing.
You guys are actually brothers?
Oh, you think because we're different colors that means we can't be brothers?
Do you see any family resemblance here?
Wow. Dude, racist much?
Like Asian people?
Huh? Why do you hate Asian people? My dad married his mom when this little dude was still in Pampers.
And the chick Melanie, aka Kylie Jenner lookalike, lays it all on pretty heavy with Military Man.
You boys can always take Patrick's bungalow and he can bungalow with me.
In my bungalow.
I'm Melanie. I don't think we had a chance to meet on the plane.
It was pretty noisy.
I can get pretty noisy.
Damn.
So, what's your fantasy?
Some good banter takes place between all the guests, and they speculate as to what is going on potentially. Holograms, LARPing, being under hallucinogens, or some of the theories that get thrown out.
Live action role playing is actually pretty fun. So I've heard from dorks.
You saved it.
Thank you.
Mr. Rourke, after assuring them that they have good rum in their drinks, he tells all the guests they won't be disappointed. Mr. Rourke explains that there is only one fantasy per guest and that you must see it through its natural conclusion, no matter what. He also says he doesn't know how these fantasies are going to unfold, only the island knows. Wait a second, the island has a conscience and can predict the future? It's also funny and ironic because he said just seconds ago they won't be disappointed.
And I promise you will not be disappointed.
What if the island has a different plan or idea than what they had? So Mr. Rourke really isn't in charge of how things go. He essentially is just the messenger and guide on behalf of the island. So the stepbrothers, after mentioning they don't have any rooms yet, JD and Brax are the first ones to experience their fantasy. The others start tomorrow. They get taken through the woods in the dark, and I started thinking maybe they just get killed right here and now, because it definitely looks like an environment where that would happen if you're in a horror movie. And maybe their fantasy was getting killed in the middle of a grass field in the dark. But no, Mr. Rourke brings them to their badass-looking party. Looks like a real banger. One brother wants to be with a bunch of chicks, and the other wants to be with dudes and smoke. For them, certainly things are going as planned. Brax winds up seeing the same figure that Gwen saw earlier while enjoying some pot. But he's taken some hits, so he just chalks it up to it's just the weed making him hallucinate.
This is some good weed.
Gwen wakes up to Skeletor staring at her. He informs her that Mr. Rourke has requested to see her. Mr. Rourke pays what essentially is a compliment to her by saying that most people's fantasies are very unimaginative and often sexually explicit, whereas hers is quite different. If I had one wish, it would be to have a do-over. Because she wrote happiness and her aren't compatible, and that her mistakes and regrets were old friends. Mr. Rourke questions her on several things, such as her relationship status, and what does she not like about her job and real estate, and asks, does she want children? And Gwen gets a little snippy. She had a man in mind that she wanted to be with and says she was in a dark place on the anniversary of them being together. For a year, he proposed and she said no. So this has been haunting her ever since, and Mr. Rourke gets psychological.
Do you want to have children?
I'm sorry, is this a therapy session or a vacation?
If you're lucky, both. Regret is a disease. It has afflicted you for too long, and I can help you cure it.
Puts on his white coat and says her fantasy is behind those closed doors, right in front of her. Rightfully so, she has this bewildered look on her face, and opens the door and is amazed to see that to a T, the restaurant that the guy Alan proposed to her in is right here and now. And oh, by the way, Mr. Allen himself is here. Mr. Rourke shows them to her table, and she's in astonishment, and thinks that they are role-playing and pranking her. She confronts Mr. Rourke and claims that this isn't what she wanted and thinks this isn't real. And also believes that Mr. Rourke and Mr. Allen conspired and are essentially role-playing. He leaves her with some words of wisdom.
You are here because regret has ruined your life. Do not make this another moment you will regret.
Gwen's astonished that this Fantasy Island experience is actually able to pull off one so incredibly realistic that she can't believe it. Patrick and Melanie are waiting for their fantasy to get started, and she's curious about his fantasy, and he says he wanted to enlist in the military, but his mother made him promise her that he wouldn't. So he became a cop instead. He's always wanted to be a soldier, and says now is his best opportunity to play one at least. He also mentions that he never got to see any action as a cop because there was an incident, and he got stuck behind a desk, which in translation means something not so good happened under his watch, and that's why he's no longer in the line of duty. He done fucked up.
Ow! Get your ass to jail! Ow! Hey, what the hell are you doing? You can't do that! Ow! 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 Sweet! Ow!
This adventure is his chance to fulfill the fantasy of being a soldier. Melanie's fantasy is to have revenge on a childhood bully that made her life difficult as an adolescent, and she wants to know what would it be like to be on the other end of dishing out rather than taking it. as far as being the bully. Apparently this bully dumped a bucket of toilet water on her head in the 8th grade dance. And the question I have, I don't know about you, was it before or after being used? She then was forced by her mother to see a shrink, Dr. Torture. And I'm sorry, but someone whom is struggling with mental health, perhaps seeing a fellow who has Torture in his name is maybe not the best idea. I want to know, was his last name actually Torture, or was it a nickname given by reputation? I need those details. But no reference of that, unfortunately. Melanie says all she wanted to do was staple the guy's mouth shut because he talked so much. So maybe Dr. Gab would have been a better name. Mr. Rourke informs Melanie of her instructions for her. To start her fantasy, it involves taking an elevator to get to where it will start. And when the elevator opens, it looks like something out of a Saw movie scene. She pushes a button, and in the chair is Sloane, the girl who bullied her. But Melanie still thinks this isn't real and thinks that this is some sort of very realistic hologram. She referenced earlier Tupac. She then starts pushing buttons, and different things start happening depending on what button is pushed. One zaps her, one pours water on her, and the other is playing a video of her cheating on her husband, and the next is uploading a video of it onto her Facebook. So it's literally potentially life-shattering for her, and oh, by the way, this is a live stream into what is their den area, and the husband is looking at her Facebook and is watching it. So with the husband looking at the cheating video firsthand, he calls his wife's phone and apparently knows the guy in the cheating video, which makes it worse, by far. And Melanie hears him say, "Is that where you've been the last 2 days?" And it dawns on Melanie, that's no hologram, that is actually her in the chair. The next video appears, and is the video of Mr. Rourke's team of minions kidnapping Sloane. So Melanie's fantasy is well underway, and she says out loud something she thought would literally not take place, where she would be kidnapped. Next is time for Patrick's, and he's getting dropped off in the middle of a forest, and he's greeted by Merrill. It's not actually the guy from The Walking Dead. I'm sorry, I'm just big fan of The Walking Dead, so I automatically think Michael Rooker is always Merrill. The character that he plays in this movie's name is Damon, so he grabs Patrick and tells him to whisper and informs him that people die here in this place. He sees soldiers upcoming and bails, and Patrick just plays along with his fantasy that he asks for. He can't even tell them of a fake pretend fantasy story. They just zip tie him right away and tell him he could tell it to the lieutenant. The brothers are gossiping about their nights of sexual activity, and it's quite hilarious.
I'm surprised you still stand. How'd that go?
Chastity? Believe me, the name functions purely on an ironic level. We boned.
And then it's back to Gwen's fantasy, and she gets asked by Mr. Right again, will she marry him? And this time she says yes. So everything seems to be going good, relatively, for the guests. The stepbrothers are sporting matching suits and discover a panic room, and a room with badass guns. And they find grenades and decide to shoot one from a jug machine, definitely potentially hazardous, and into the ocean it goes. Patrick's kidnappers wind up hearing the explosions, and he tells his kidnappers he didn't ask for bondage. When getting kidnapped by enemies happens, they're going to do things not necessarily in your best interest. He asks what mission is going on, and they go on to say U.S. hostages are being held prisoner. Sounds like a good plot for a war movie. All of a sudden, out of the blue, they wind up taking fire from God knows who, and Patrick gets shot. And Melanie's fantasy all of a sudden takes a dark turn. A guy walks into her bully's room, and it looks like something out of Hostel, and this guy has knives and scalpels, which usually doesn't go well for you if you're the one sitting tied up in the chair. Or, you have to be going in for a legitimate operation if those tools are on hand. She bangs on the glass to say she wants to call it off, and this guy walks over to the glass, and this dude looks like a tall behemoth WWE fighter and a stunt double for the Mountain in the Game of Thrones and Muscle Buff Pants combined, with how massive he is. He pulls down his mask, and she says Dr. Torture, and his mouth is stapled shut, which plays into what she mentioned earlier to Patrick about how she wanted to staple her therapist's mouth shut. I'm sorry, but there is no therapist in the history of therapists that looked like that. And this gives you an idea about this questionnaire. Your fantasy apparently had to be extremely specific. Melanie tells him to cut off one of her fingers, and she quickly hits a button, and this device winds up electrocuting this guy, and she goes for the dump water bucket initiation, and winds up electrocuting the monster. She then breaks the glass open to free this woman. They leave and now pursue wandering the island to try to find a way to get the hell off this island. Back to JD and Brax. Living it up, drinking liquor, and surrounded by their arm charms. Brax says he thinks he heard gunshots, and his friend with benefits gets shot right in the head. And chaos ensues. They see guys with guns, and they yell, go to the panic room, and Brax calls Rourke and says, are you enjoying your fantasy? And Brax says they were until guys with guns showed up. God, that does suck when that happens. This is not an experience I think he had in mind. Rourke then informs him of Kalashov, who was a businessman who formerly owned the house. And it certainly sounds like a Russian mafia killer with that name, and Brax has a funny response.
Who the hell's Kalashov?
It's a businessman who formerly owned the house.
What kind of business?
Mr. Rourke has a quote that is so on point and so spot on.
I'm afraid the problem with having it all is that usually other people want to take it. Look, Rourke, we don't really want to have it all, okay? We just kind of want to borrow it for the weekend.
Well, you're getting the extended experience. JD comes out of the panic room to tell his brother to come in, and the door then closes behind him, and now they are both locked out. A real ah-fuck moment if there ever was one. JD's eye candy is named Chastity, and he calls her Chas for short, and he comes up with a clever nickname in the heat of the moment.
Oh! Kind of being a chasshole!
Rourke, seriously, I'm such a weenie. I don't even do escape rooms.
As I have told
Rourke hangs up on him, and the guys with guns are in pursuit, looking like they have some not-so-nice intentions. They find them. You'll get to see how this unfolds momentarily. They aren't particularly nice. In the meantime, Melanie's bully confronts her on how she got away, and she says she headbutted her way out, stole a gun, and capped the guard. And this woman wants to know what happened to the gun. Ah, good question. And she says she lost it. I think if you're going to be this careless in this type of situation and lose your only means of protection, you might deserve to die at that point. The bully speculates on who did this to them might be. And Melanie almost shits herself because she says her name, but it's only to critique her outfit. Right after Dr. Torture winds up coming back to finish the job, and it's Damon to the rescue. What a guy, coming through in the clutch. He says if their fantasy is to die, they should come with him. Well, given how he just saved their ass, and he has a machete, it seems like he might be the best bet to listen to him. Meanwhile, the soldier wants to know how Patrick has his dog tags and a picture of him, and his son in his wallet. And Patrick tells him that was him when he was just 9 years old.
That's my son.
And he's got a nickname. What is it?
Why don't you tell me?
I was born 4 months premature. The doctor said I wouldn't make it.
Jesus Christ! Oh my God! He didn't make it.
But I did. You said I wasn't the type to throw in the towel. That I was a fighter, like Muhammad Ali.
There's no way he can know such a specific saying unless that indeed is his son. Which in that case, this soldier is a vampire and doesn't age, or Patrick has some sort of condition in which he ages rapidly. So now you're wondering, at least, I certainly was, is this island able to bend and warp time? Gwen wakes up to look at her phone, and it's a wedding photo on her background of her and Alan. And she tells Mr. Rourke this is a great Photoshop. He tells her it's real, and she says it can't be because he just proposed last night. Mr. Rourke asks, are you sure? And now all of a sudden they have a daughter? He tells her, you are the mother. She looks through her phone, and Rourke says to see for yourself. And it's all these photos of them together through the years, and Mr. Rourke explains that this island has powers, but goes into little detail about how it works. And I must say, there is something beautiful about it, and disturbing. It's a beautiful scene and visual, no doubt. But it's living a lie, though, because you have no recollection or memories of any kind of what got you to this point with your now husband and daughter. Fantasy Island turns into Awkward Island real fast. Patrick and his dad get into a scrum, and Brax and TJ are being interrogated, and TJ gets punched for saying, this is Fantasy Island and this is for fun.
What color is my underwear?
Apparently fun can be subjective. This frightening dude keeps talking about this guy Kalashov, and Brax and TJ have no idea what's going on. Utterly clueless, this guy claims that they did something with the cash, and cocaine. He starts cutting into his arm, and TJ tells him the money is downstairs by the garage. Brax and him link eyes, and they have that speaking to each other telepathically moment where Brax gets why he's doing this. Smart move to try to separate them and buy some time to figure something out, potentially, to get out of this mess. Meanwhile, Gwen is all in her feels on the beach, and she says she loves them both so much. Which, Gwen, is definitely a little bit of bullshit. You stiff-armed Alan the first time, and your daughter you've only known for 10 minutes. So, she wants a different fantasy now. Gwen is impossible to please. Clearly. I regret this. I want this now. I want a different one. Maybe this is why you were and are alone, Gwen. Damon is leading the Kylie Jenner lookalike and her bully into a cave, and behind the bully lurks her evil doppelganger. She looks behind and nothing is there, and as she walks away, we see the evil twin. And it has Spider-Man capabilities, So now you are really wondering what the fuck is going on here. Is time being manipulated? And there are evil twins on the island? Sloane sees the burnt demon guy looking up at her, and demon-looking man no longer there. Damon brings them to this area with this glowing stone over a beautiful structure with water. I'm tempted to flip a coin and make a wish. And Sloane looks into it, and it shows your fantasy and what you really want and are thinking. And Melanie apparently wants to get back with her husband, and desires that he tells her that he forgives her. She wants to know what this is, and this guy Damon is a PI, personal investigator that was hired to find out what's exactly going on with this place. What happens and how. There's this client of his that wants all of this for himself. We don't know who the client is, but obviously it's got to be someone who's very well off. Damon booked a stay at Fantasy Island where he saw his daughter that he lost. And he said it was great, but it got twisted and became a nightmare. He also says this place and Rourke are evil, and Rourke destroyed his phone to call for help. So Rourke knew things were going sideways for Damon. Rourke, he Tom Brady'd Damon's phone, he Hillary Clinton'd it, but Damon claims he knows he can stop it. Says the island's power comes from this rock. It turns the water black and can bring back people to life. But they aren't really them. They bleed black blood from their eyes, and they're essentially alive, technically, but not figuratively. I mean, they look like something out of 30 Days a Night, the vampires, so the lights are on but nobody's home. Or if they are home, they're extremely evil. He hands Melanie a ticket of a private pilot he knows and gives her a canteen of the magical water, and tells her to get out and tell the world about this place. Damon unintentionally exposes Melanie to Sloane by saying that he can't get anywhere near their hotel, and that she will have a better chance of pulling this off because she's a guest. So Sloane basically gives the "what the fuck do you mean you're a guest" look. Sloane glances into the rock mirror and sees what Melanie's fantasy is as she's looking at it. And it's not her so long ago being tied up and gagged. So she's able to put two and two together and realizes she's the reason that she's there. So things get a little spicy.
You did all of this because of a couple of pranks? Pranks?
I haven't made a crank call in years. Shh, quiet, it's ringing.
You tortured me every single day for years.
You do intend to torture me, huh? Well, go ahead. Do your worst. You still won't get your ticket money back. I can take whatever you can dish out.
We don't want to torture you.
Oh, please. I teased you a little. I was so traumatized by what you did. I had to finish high school from home.
Melanie's ready to get off this island, and Damon says he's going to show her. Gwen sits down with Julia and tells her that she feels unfulfilled because she has a daughter that's 5, but no memories of. Which makes sense that that's unsatisfying. She tells her she wants a redo, and it has to do with a fire at her old apartment from 6 years ago, because someone died and she says it was her fault. She then confronts Mr. Rourke about wanting a fantasy done right. She claims she didn't know she could change the past. He begrudgingly obliges, and she takes off the new ring she got and goes walking through the same door she walked through the first time. And here it is now. A do-over from 6 years ago. She starts sprinting upstairs, running through doors into a raging fire like she's an NFL running back. She bumps into Brax and JD going up the stairs, and she's yelling through the door where the fire is burning, "Nick." And this is the man that Gwen's responsible for killing. Gwen says she is going to get help. She approaches a cop, and it's Patrick. So these people are all connected. And she tells him that we need to help save this man who's trapped behind the door. And he says to wait for the fire department. And he knows deep down that's not the right thing. He's looking at the flames just taking over the apartment. But he sticks to, let's just wait for the firemen. I know that's what you're supposed to do, but when you look at those flames, it doesn't appear like there's much time left. So she says the hell with you and is going to try to do it herself. But it doesn't look too good as she starts collapsing on the floor, choking from the smoke. Meanwhile, Brax is being escorted by the Purge Mafia guys, and he darts into the panic room real quick after distracting them temporarily after turning on the jugs machine, that wonderful device they were using to fire grenades earlier. Brax has the heavy weaponry on his side of the door and goes full Scarface mode with these mofos.
This ain't your fantasy, asshole.
Damon offers some words of wisdom for Melanie that's really good about getting over the past.
And you, grow up.
When I grow up, I want to stick my head through a circle at the beginning of movies and roar.
What's up now, bitches?
Stop giving this teenage version of her all this dang power over your life. Revenge ain't gonna fix you. Only you can fix you.
But Dr. Torture is back from the depths of hell, and Damon tackles him off a very high ledge. They are both dead. very much resembling Yukon Cornelius and the Abominable Snowman, except they had a happy ending. Patrick and his father were on the prowl, and Brax walks out holding a grenade, and he's calling the shots now.
I let go of this handle, we go boom.
I like that boom boom pow.
Put the pin.
All right, Pinhead, your time is up.
Who you calling Pinhead?
Back in. Okay. Arms on the ground. Now.
He's taken them hostage and has the clown mask on. Patrick sees him with the grenade, and Brax has to tell him to not worry, it's him. Patrick starts asking, why are you in my fantasy, and vice versa. The guard is let down now. A scuffle ensues along with a gunshot. The guy holding TJ captive goes to the door, and he's shot by the military fantasy brigade. The models are freed, and Patrick has a statement for Chastity, his main woman.
Chastity? Real disappointed.
Whatever.
The guy who was fatally shot sits back up, like what David was talking about earlier. When you die on Fantasy Island, your eyes bleed black, which indicates that you're not entirely dead, but you're gone. Patrick shoots the guy he was wrestling with, and this dude with the grenade, Brax grasps the grenade right from the Russian Mafia guy's hands, which prevents it from going off. And I have to say, has something like that ever happened with a grenade? I highly doubt it. Where it's transferred from hand to hand without it going off. There has to be a little slither of a moment right there where nobody's got the pressure on the grenade. But if that were the case, they would have all went kaboom. And Patrick's dad says if he would have thrown the grenade, and Patrick finishes the sentence with, you would have sacrificed yourself. It's one of the things they talked about when they met each other in this fantasy, about how he sacrificed himself in war in Venezuela by jumping on a grenade. Just as they are celebrating, JD gets shot, after realizing Jenny from back home is really the woman he wants to be with. Chastity just didn't do it for him. And other people get shot dead as well. And Patrick has to watch his dad die from the black-eyed, looking like something out of the 30 Days of Night vampires. Patrick's dad has now died a second time. Losing a parent whom you love once has to be hard enough, but a second time now, completely devastating to what seems like such a nice man. Sloane and Melanie go back to the location that was the torture room because there was a phone there. Sloane and Melanie call her husband, who, might not be happy at the moment after seeing what he saw earlier. She tells him she's been kidnapped and she apologizes to her husband directly. And indirectly, but almost directly to Melanie about how she was wrong and understands if you'd ever forgive me. Very touching moment. She tells him to call this number, and he miraculously says, what do you need me to do? He would have been completely justified in saying, you're getting what you deserve, karma's a bitch. So she tells him that when you call the number, to say Damon needs the plane. And his response is quite funny.
I have a phone number. I need you to call it and tell them that Damon needs the plane.
What did you say to me?
Peter, what are you doing?
Get off my plane!
That's not even the same.
Do I even want to know?
No, it's not what you think.
Well, Stan, you want to know what I think? What?
Julia comes to the rescue to get Gwen. Fantasy Island is like Narnia. The nearest door at any time leads back to the hallways of Fantasy Island. And she says she didn't save him, and thinks this is someone else's fantasy. And this is perhaps a great big single fantasy that has been orchestrated for all of the guests to be there at one time. So they are essentially pawns in someone's real fantasy of having them all together at once and just fucking with them. More on that in a bit. So Melanie and Sloane hear someone coming down the elevator, and out comes Patrick and Brax. And there's a moment of humor that takes place in this tense scene when Brax asks Sloane, who are you?
We're looking for Rourke. Who are you?
I'm her fantasy.
Nice.
Not like that.
Melanie asks about JD and finds out he didn't make it. As they're leaving, Mr. Rourke comes out and he's sticking to the script still. And you learn now that yes indeed, the staff are just cult loyalists to the master. That is Rourke. Gwen tells everybody that this is not their individual fantasies, it's someone else's. Nick Taylor, the guy who was the victim of the fire, and he was a roommate of Brax and JD, and died because of the fire that Gwen started. Brax tells everyone he thought Nick was out with a girl, so he told JD not to go back for him. Gwen asks Melanie, she didn't see her there that night, or in her redo of her fantasy, and she says that she was the girl he was supposed to be with. She was a classmate of his, but she says she got cold feet and canceled, so if he was out with her, he wouldn't have been in the apartment to die in the fire. So the result of her cold feet led him to staying in, and as a result dying. Gwen had just moved into the building and put a kettle on for tea, and forgot to turn the burner off, and The rest is history. The light bulb goes off in Gwen's head that everybody there was involved in some form of this guy Nick's death. And Patrick really wraps it up by saying that this is one big fuck you revenge fantasy tour for Nick Taylor. And Rourke confirms it. So it's he who is the charred, burnt guy who kept popping up throughout the film. Rourke says it ends with their deaths. You all die now.
You will die.
And happily ever after, essentially. Rourke tells the henchman not to pursue Patrick and the others after he scurries off and says she wants them all together. Well, of course, the question now is, who the hell is she? The plane comes in at perfect timing. As it's coming in, it's shot down with a missile launcher by the terrorists of the Fantasy Island game. Reminds me something straight out of Lone Survivor. And not only do they shoot the plane down, they try to take them down with a rocket personally. They just pivot right to the side and just fire that rocket launcher right at them. They escape, but things look bleak, and Brax says they all work for Rourke. But Gwen brings up a good point that Julia saved her, so maybe she's an outlet of hope. Melanie thinks Julia might be Nick's mom. Gwen's thinking her coughing up blood might be that she's ill and this is her last dying wish. And that she saved Gwen from the fire because she herself wants to tell them herself before they die. Which, that would be some pretty sick, sinister shit. That plays right into revenge as a dish best served cold. A lot like Jason Voorhees' mom from Friday the 13th. This is why you must die, essentially. Patrick says we should try to apologize and make peace if possible. Brax, I think, nails it right on the head with this response.
Right, someone that brought us to this island to die is probably looking for a little more than just an apology.
Melanie brings up if we can't stop her, perhaps we can work out some sort of magic with the stone in the cave and destroy it. And potentially put this revenge tour shit show to a stop. So they make their way to the cave. Brax separates from the group because he thinks he sees JD walking by. Gwen thinks she hears the stone, water spring, so she goes into a different section. They are not a very disciplined group, let me tell you. And Dr. Torture pops up again. This guy was killed, we thought, twice, but he's back for a third time. Gwen keeps hearing laughter, and maybe she's lost her mind. Perhaps. Patrick's walking down this pathway, and these hands from down under just grab him and tear him down under the water. Sloane's evil doppelganger jumps down from above. Brax sees JD again, but it might not be a beloved reunion because it's not really JD. It's the evil, sick, sinister one. He gets shot at point-blank range by purged men, and Brax takes off. So this is like an acid trip nightmare now that's taking place. The island is mentally fucking with them, and they all see terrible things that range from Sloane's doppelganger talking shit to her, Patrick fighting his black-eyed, heartless father, and Gwen seeing her 5-year-old daughter pummel Daddy's face in with a rock. And Nick enters the picture, and Gwen has a convo with Nick. And he goes from the burned Nick to charred Nick, and she begs him that this won't bring him back, and he says he's not the one doing this, and she says to let the others go. She screams out, "Do you hear me, Julia?" And Nick's response is an ah shit kind of moment.
Who's Julia?
Melanie stabs Patrick multiple times after he drowns his evil possessed version of his father, and Dr. Torture walks out Melanie and Sloane to Brax and Gwen, but she has a grenade and she tells everyone that this is her fantasy, so apparently her and Nick had a date already and were planning to get together again, and she was so happy with the first one. He made her happy and not feel worthless, but him dying in the fire caused her to not get that second date. So as a result, she is now punishing all of them here and now for being a part of his death in some way. So Melanie is doing this for Nick. Sloane rattles her cage with some insults and gives a look to Gwen and Brax to steal the grenade. And they steal the grenade and the knife, and now they are on the offensive and make a getaway. Brax says, "I think what we are all thinking."
Holy shit, she went out with him one time?
Yeah, she's a real crazy b****. They get to the stone, and Gwen looks into it and sees her fantasy, and all of a sudden Julia shows up, and Rourke is standing there in the corner, and turns out Julia is Rourke's wife. This version of her, though, doesn't know him as her husband, because Rourke fucked up on a technicality, saying, "I wish to have her back as when I first met her forever." Which sounds great at first, but when you think about it for more than a few seconds, you realize when you first meet someone, you have no memories of anything, because you're just meeting them for the first time. So he messed up his fantasy on a technicality, which you feel bad for him in a way. Here's your second shot, and you fuck it up because you word it improperly. So he now lies to her and tells her she's his assistant, because she keeps becoming ill and then dying, and then coming back again, and not knowing him. So he says the whole courting process is just too painful to do it over and over again. So what he's been telling her is that she's just his assistant. He grabs the grenade from Gwen. This movie is ridiculous from the standpoint that this grenade is just swapping hands time and time again, with it never going off. Melanie walks in with Mountain Man, and Melanie informs everyone if he doesn't give every guest their fantasy, he would then lose Julia forever. Gwen has some thoughts about that.
You think that's love? Letting Julia die over and over again forever? That's hell! She's your prisoner. You have to let her go.
I cannot.
And he says he can't, and he just tosses the grenade away and sticks to the script that you must see your fantasy through. Hell or high water. Julia and Mr. Rourke have this emotional moment together where she tells him that these guests are yours, not the island's. And Patrick might have been stabbed by Melanie, but he's back. And Rourke comes back saying everybody gets a fantasy. And so Sloane picks up on that and takes a swig of the water that Damon gave her in the canteen. And Melanie's an idiot and talks shit.
Sloane's fantasy? What, that she and her husband get to be together forever?
No. That you and Nick do. Those are the rules.
Sloane's fantasy was to have Melanie pulled into the water abyss and all of the possessed bad guys, looking like Venom dissolving in Spider-Man. The antagonist is never truly dead the first time, and Melanie comes up from down under to toss the grenade, and Patrick jumps on it. And Gwen wakes up. There's a lot going on so quickly here. Patrick, being the hero he was, sacrificed himself, just like his father did. Everybody meets up in the lobby asking what's going on, and they want to know where Patrick is, and Rourke says he died a hero, and he's putting a picture up of him and his father. Very emotionally touching, inspiring, in your feels kind of moment. Such a beautiful, lovely photo. He gets put up on the wall with his father and Brax and tells the service what he's about to do.
1 star in Yelp.
Sloane, as they are about to leave, says, I think what we too would be thinking.
So what's gonna stop us all from exposing this island and suing you?
Rourke gives her the spin.
Well, fantasies, Mrs. Madison, are a lot like dreams. You rarely remember the details, but you always remember how they make you feel.
Well, I just remembered that I want to get the hell off this island.
And Gwen wants to know what's going to happen to him. And he says he's going to stay there and protect the island without regret. Brax is longingly looking at the water. And Rourke tells him since he took place in his brother's fantasy that he can be granted a fantasy technically because it wasn't his. And he wants his brother back. Again, another just touching, great emotional moment right there. And Rourke tells him in order for that to happen, he must stay on the island forever in order for that to be granted. Which really isn't a terrible deal, seeing how beautiful this damn island is. I wouldn't be too upset. And we have Sloane in her feels saying she can't believe how bad she was to Melanie back then. And Gwen lets her know all you can do is forgive yourself, Sloane. Sloane shouldn't feel too bad, obviously. You shouldn't bully. It's wrong and it's an immoral thing to do, but consider what Melanie did and tried to do. I think it's safe to say they more than broke even. The pilot closes the door without Brax and Gwen says, Brax isn't on the plane. And look who's riding shotgun. None other than JD. And he says, I don't think he's coming. In the reincarnation process, it's interesting how JD can leave, but Brax has to stay there as a guest. A prisoner, whatever you want to call it. Brax and Rourke talk about the job he will have. The one thing I really want to know, JD just appears on the plane passenger's side. I would have loved to have seen the reincarnation process take place, the rising from the dead moment or whatever. Things that I would have loved to have known, but sadly we don't get that. But a fairly happy, uplifting ending nonetheless. The end. There you have it, Fantasy Island. For a PG-13 horror movie, this is a film that is able to pull off, in my eyes, a pretty decent movie. And is able to keep you interested, at least it was for me. You do want to find out what is going to be the conclusion for these characters, especially once their fantasies start taking place. There is pretty good humor sprinkled throughout the movie that will make you chuckle, especially if you're someone baked or drinking with a friend or two. So between the characters not being terrible and the aesthetics of how the movie looks with hot women and beautiful scenery, it's a solid film in my eyes. Blumhouse is a big-time production company and usually doesn't miss on the movies they produce. And the way the movie winds up connecting throughout between the characters, to me, is very well done. Looking at the Rotten Tomatoes score, to me, they are an abomination. The audience with a 40% and the critics with an abysmal 8%. The actors must have wronged the critic reviewers of this film to me in some way. They must have stolen money from them, had sex with family members, or potentially all the above. To me, I don't understand, especially from the critics, but even the audience somewhat too. You have to judge movies on a scale. Any reasonable movie watcher knows going into a film like this, you're not going to see a brilliant masterpiece with the acting and dialogue that of The Godfather or Jaws. Saving Private Ryan, the way I review films is always and forever. Is the plot and the storyline unique or original at all? If so, I definitely give props and points for that. Did I care about the characters at all? Was the acting good? And was there entertainment at the end of the day? To me, the answer to all of those is yes. Also, this movie has a reasonable runtime at 1 hour and 49 minutes. It doesn't painfully drag out, the plot is able to simmer nicely and be delivered. With the audience and the critics giving such low scores, that might be a hot take, but that's how I feel after seeing this movie again. This was a film that I did see in theaters, but after seeing it again, I stand by my opinion. And now, my final grade for Fantasy Island. Can I get a drum roll, please? a C. This is certainly an average movie. It's not an above-average film. Nobody besides a hardcore moviegoer watcher like me will recall this film or even have heard about it probably. But just because it's average doesn't mean it's an insult. I think in entertainment value, this movie is pretty good. What keeps it at a C for me is just that it's an obvious junk food kind of film. But this is a film that's good to have in the rotation if you seek entertainment and want to check out a solid horror movie film. With the PG-13 rating, you have to factor that in there, that our movies, they're able to take more risks and able to do more over-the-top things because you don't have that restriction. Thank you for watching my movie review for Blumhouse's Fantasy Island. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that like and subscribe button down below, as well as the notification bell, so you are notified about the next movie review. I'm Ryan Woolley signing off, humbly saying thank you. And remember, gentlemen, happy girl, happy world, happy wife, happy life. And as always, may the force be with you.